Ever since I was a little girl, I've never really felt at home in my own body. Early on, it was just a sense that there was something not right later. That sense of unease solidified and became clear. My body didn't feel like my own, even though it looked like it should. According to the most definitions of should to me, it looked grotesque and ugly. There was just too much of it. They used to call it Apotemnophilia, but my therapist says it's old-fashioned. Body integrity identity disorder is what they call now. Much more clinical, much more safe for people to talk about. Instead of saying, I want to cut off my old legs because they don't feel like they belong to me, I can now say, I'm a sufferer of BIID. So much better. Whatever it is, makes me hate myself and this body I'm trapped in. I could tell you about the times when my body has let me down. About those times in my childhood when I would dig my dirty fingernails into the flesh of my thigh just to get a semblance of relief, of how I would sit on my legs until they went numb. The pleasure of once for feeling right would wash over me in waves until the sensation once again returned to those hateful appendages. For most of my life, I thought I was alone in my particular brand of torment. No one could really understand this desire I had. Occasionally, I would see some trashy daytime talk show where some people like me were guests. The audience gawped and hooted, and the host smirked incredulously as if asking the audience, "Can you believe these freaks?" But I saw something different in those. When I looked at the faces of the people who had successfully transformed their bodies into the right shape, I saw happiness. Not even the disgust emanating from the audience could take that away from them. I was incredibly jealous of those people, and lonely in my jealousy. No one could possibly understand what I felt. Society had deemed it wrong. We're taught from the moment of birth that our bodies were precious, temples even, and that we should do whatever we can to preserve them. We'd look at the people with physical disabilities as if they were somehow wrong. That's not what I see at all. The internet was a good godsend for me and other people like me. In my adolescence, I discovered news groups for people with Apotemnophilia and so on later on the message boards for those with BIID. By that point, the language had evolved. I was finally connected with the people who understood me as I had always wanted to be understood. It was as if a weight had been lifted from me, and I could finally be myself. In these groups, I wasn't a freak or a mistake. I was accepted. We didn't meet in person for a long time. Most of us lived far away from one another, and many of us were too poor or too young to travel halfway across the country. We did talk, though, and formed deep friendships. We played role-playing games on those messenger boards, each of us disappearing for a moment into a world where our perceptions matched our bodies. In my fantasies, it was me, but without the dead meat hanging from my hips. I wheeled around town, satisfied with the whole, even though parts of me were missing. When I eventually would snap back into reality, depression would overcome me. That's when the friendships I have developed were their most precious. We all could share in that feeling. We all could comfort one another, even though we were miles away. Those groups were how I survived this long. If not for them, well, I don't know that I could have kept myself from doing something stupid. Late last year, I discovered that 3 of the people in my group lived in my city. It was like learning I had a long-lost twin. We talked for months, growing our bond through the internet, before we opted to meet in person. It was necessary to wait, given how disingenuous some people can be online. Grace and Howard were both near my age and had struggled with BIID for their entire lives. Kyle was slightly older and no longer considered himself suffer from BIID. We all met up at the coffee shop downtown. I arrived first and I knew Kyle the second I saw him. I could tell it was him. He had one arm, the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Grace and Howard arrived a few minutes later, and we immediately got down to sharing our stories. When it came time for Kyle to share his, we've all listened to with a rapt of fascination. "I always knew I was wrong," he said. We nodded in understanding. He continued, "The arm that was attached to me was not my own. It was like how I knew instinctively from childhood. It drove me crazy. Every day I looked at it and feel hate well up inside me. I used to cut it, a little strokes to see what it was like. It didn't help. I only wanted it gone. It was an obsession, really. All I thought about every day was getting rid of my arm. Then one day I had enough. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to do something. I was so eyed up and I did the only thing I could think of. I turned on the garbage disposal, and before I could talk myself out of it, shoved my arm into it. I passed out from the pain, I'll admit. Thankfully, my wife came home just after it happened. They got me to the hospital in time to save my life, though I was unconscious for it all. When the long-faced doctor came and told me that they couldn't save my arm, I nearly jumped for joy. I tried to hide it, but honestly, it was the happiest day of my life." We stared at him in a very shocked envy. "And it did make you feel better long term, I mean?" I asked. "Maggie, it made me feel like I was complete. Since that day, my life has been so happy, so fulfilled, I don't regret it for a second." Howard, Grace, and I exchanged looks. I knew what we were all thinking. How could we do the same thing? Kyle must have understood that look, because he piped up again. "Listen though, happy as I am, you do not want to go through about the things the way I did. It's incredibly risky, and you could easily die." "But what are the alternatives?" asked Grace. "I've been to every surgeon in the state and no one will remove the undamaged limb." "It's true even out of state," grumbled Howard. "They don't understand what it's like to wake up every day in a body that isn't your own." Kyle nodded. I know, he said. He took a look around the room and leaned in, whispering, "What if I told you there is a surgeon who will do it?" Grace laughed. "Some back alley amputation? There's no way anyone would do that." "There is, though," said Kyle. "I know it sounds crazy, but there's this guy, Dr. Felix. He helps people like us. It's his life's goal, and he's legit." I sat back in my chair, chewing on my bottom lip. If this was true, if a doctor would do the surgery without damage to the limb, it could be a life changer. Kyle once again spoke up. "What would you have him do if you could?" "My left leg," said Howard, not even pausing to consider. "Both my legs," I replied. "Same as Maggie," said Grace. We exchanged glances at Kyle and smiled. "It can absolutely be done." He pushed the business card across the table towards us. I debated calling the number for days. We all did. In the end, we each decided that our only thing we could make us happy. We eventually called Dr. Felix, and he agreed to come to town and schedule appointments with each of us. The surgery would have been done in my own house, as hospitals and doctors' offices were much too dangerous. As Dr. Felix was adamant about the discretion, his license was on the line after all. I agreed, and the date was set for a month out. I spent the next few weeks in a tizzy. I bought a wheelchair and practiced maneuvering around my house, picking up or rearranging anything that got in my way. I studied post-surgery care instructions and read up upon the procedure. The days passed in agonizing slowness. When the day of the surgery came, I felt like a weight had been lifted. I met Dr. Felix at my front door. Anticipation and excitement bubbled up inside me, just like the Christmases of my childhood. Finally, it would all be okay. He greeted me warmly, taking my both hands into his. "Hi, Maggie. How nice to meet you. I know you're excited to get started, but I want to go over a few things with you first." I nodded to my assistant. "You wish to have both your legs amputated, correct? Above the knee?" "Yes, that's correct," I said, barely able to contain myself. "And you understand the ramifications of this surgery. I know it sounds stupid, but you do realize that once your legs have been removed, and there's no getting them back?" I smiled broadly at him. "Yes, Dr. Felix. I understand that perfectly." "Okay," he said. "Let's get to work then." I waited in the kitchen while Dr. Felix prepared in the bedroom. It had to be sanitized for the surgery, and I understood that it would take some time. Every second of waiting felt like an eternity. Finally, he appeared in my doorway. "It's time. Your room has been prepared." I let out a little squeak and followed the doctor to my bedroom. crisp clean with white linens lay on my bed and the IV drip next to it. I changed into a gown and lay on the sheets. The doctor made a quick work of cleaning my legs and inserting the IV. As I watched as he pulled the syringe from the table bedside and injected its contents into the IV bag. I felt myself relax and waited for the unconsciousness that would soon usher me into new life. It did not come. After seconds I tried to move, to alert the doctor that I was still awake. I found out that I could not. I was paralyzed. You may be wondering, Dr. Felix said as he moved around the bed, why is that you are both awake and immobile? Well, it's simple enough. I need you to be aware of what I'm doing. I need you to see the procedure unfold. Unfortunately, there will be some pain. I tried to force my body to move, tried to wrench myself free from the drug-induced prison I was in. But I could not. He was already going to cut off my legs with me awake. As the thought passed through my mind, Dr. Felix propped me up slightly and positioned my head so I was looking directly at my legs. I've been working on a treatment, you know. He looked at me as if I could answer him, and then shrugged his shoulders. No one really knows what causes BIAD. Some think it's the brain's inability to accurately map the body. Others take it as a Freudian stance the whole thing, saying that it's all those important early childhood experiences. That's, of course, complete hogwash. As I could only stare, the doctor pulled out a needle from his bag, tapped it twice with his forefinger, and then injected it into my IV. In my theory, which I would need your help to test, is that actually well, that's not for me to say. Wouldn't want to confound my research, would I? All I could tell you is that this drug you've been given is a cure, plain and simple. The doctor hummed to himself as he began taking his instruments from the bag. Panic welled inside me with each subsequent tool he produced. The scalpel, the oscillating saw, the ligature. I felt like I couldn't breathe and wanted desperately to shut my eyes. Try as I might, however, my eyelids stayed open and unblinking. As the doctor began to tie off my right leg above the knee, a new unfamiliar feeling washed over me. Suddenly, with the force of a jackhammer to the gut, I did not want to close my legs. I felt a surge of desire so strong it was so overwhelming. I needed to keep my legs. They were a part of me. They were my legs, mine. I would have cried out if I could, would have screamed out until my throat was raw, but I could not. I could only watch while he brought the scalpel to my skin, and could only watch as a line bright red appeared on my thigh. I felt the cut through my entire body. The pain was sharp and radiant. I can't say whether the pain distracted from the regret, or whatever the regret distracted from the pain. All I know is that my mind has mixed the two together until they became one and the same. I'm not sure how deep the doctor got before I lost consciousness. That blissful escape my brain shut down might have lasted a few moments, or might have been lasted hours. I faintly recalled coming to the sound of the oscillating saw cutting into my femur, before blacking out once more. When I finally awoke for good, I was lying in my homemade hospital bed. I was alone, and my legs were gone. I screamed, both relieved and frightened that I could once again move my body. At the sound of my voice, Dr. Felix entered the room. "What have you done to me?" I asked, angry at myself for the way my voice sounded, like a petulant child's voice. "I haven't eliminated permanently your BIID. You're quite welcome." "You took my legs." "Well, yes, you did request that, didn't you not?" "You changed my brain. You made me want my legs, and then you took them." "My dear girl, don't you see? You've been an instrument in providing a cure for this wretched disease. I messed up nothing, only repaired a broken neural pathway." I stared at him. "Now, of course, it won't be your name in the literature, but you'll be just there the same. Patient 7, cure of all body integrity, identity, disorder." "But why take my legs? Why did you take them as much as I want to keep them?" "Oh well, I have to be rigorous, do I not? If I had given you the shot without taking your legs, you might not have come to the realization that you desired them. You might have rationalized away your newfound affection for your own body. But doesn't that just confound your research? I mean, how do you know it was the drug and not the realization that I was losing my legs made me want to keep them? He stared at me for a long time before finally speaking again. It's not your place to know my methods. Your reaction upon waking told me that any post-intervention interview could have. Now, no more talking, girl. You need your rest. I watched as he pulled a syringe from his pocket and injected into the IV. Faded from my vision, he faded as I lost consciousness. When I awoke again, Dr. Felix was gone. I was alone in my room and my wheelchair sat beside me, with a packet of post-surgery instructions from the seat. I saw that the straps had been installed above my bed, presumably to allow me to move from my bed to chair. For hours, I sat in my bed, alternating between bursts of crying and fists of rage. How could he have done that to me? I'm ashamed on how it took long for me to think of others, Grace and Howard. They all had appointments with Dr. Felix too. I felt alongside bed table until I could locate my phone. I turned it on and immediately called Grace. There was no answer. Neither was an answer at Howard's. I sat there and realization finally hit me. We were all in his test subjects. I didn't want to think about Howard and Grace, but about how they too would have felt the same fear and regretted as I did. I sat with my thoughts. I began to dull the throbbing in my legs. No, the remains of my legs. The pain medicine was evidently wearing off. I searched for the bottle of Vicodin and that doctor had left on the nightstand, only to find that it was empty. I shook the bottle but heard nothing. All while pain began to prick at the nerve endings up and down my legs. I reached down and rubbed the spot that hurt the most and encountered only empty sheets. My legs were gone, but still the pain pulsed through it. Phantom limb. I had read about it in my surgery preparation, but the reality still shocked me still. Alone and butchered in my room, I screamed. It was a day later. I heard from Grace by then. I was moving around the house as I practiced. I was recovering physically, but mentally I was a wreck. My legs throbbed from the pain from my ankle to my hip, and no pain medication could soothe the limbs that weren't there. They burned, pulsed, as if punishing me ever having hated them. Grace had fared no better. We spoke on the phone for hours and mostly just crying onto the receiver. In desperation, she had to even go on to the police. But once she told them she consented to the surgery, they only referred her to a psychologist. She only heard from Howard and she told me that he was doing slightly better than us. He only lost one leg after all, and after she and I resolved to find as much information as we could on Dr. Felix, tracking him down became our only goal. We met up with Grace, Howard, and I a few weeks after our surgeries to exchange notes and try to find the good doctor. We had come up with nothing. His office is empty, said Grace, over a steaming mug of coffee on my kitchen table. I went by last week. No sign that anyone has been here in ages. And you asked for the neighbors? Howard asked. Grace looked irritated. Of course I asked the neighbors. They haven't seen anyone fit that doctor's description. I couldn't find anything about him, not even in the medical journals. Whoever he really is, he's not publishing his work, I said. Figures, said Grace. I tried to track down his phone number, but it was a burner. No record of the guy anywhere. No trace of Kyle either. God damn it, Howard shouted, slamming his palm onto the table. We jumped back, startled. It's just, he started. It's just so unfair. This is all I ever wanted, and he's turned my dream into a living hell. Grace and I reached out to Howard, holding him as he started to cry. We sat there what looked like could have been hours, consoling each other through the tears. We had gotten what we wanted, and now we have to live with it for the rest of our lives.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties. And as always, stay pretty.